Okay, thank you for joining me for the accounting and finance coaching session. My name is Echala Okori, your coach, and today I want to talk about the concept of relevant costs in decision making. Relevant costs in decision making. Now, when we make decisions, and I'm sure everybody makes decisions, individuals, firms, management, we all make decisions. Governments, we make decisions. But I want us to look at decision making from the point of view of management. Management may have a course to make decisions, to choose an option if they want to carry out various projects. For example, you have option A, you have B, you have C, you have D. Let's say these are all options where you can put in your money. Why do you need to rack your brain to decide which one to choose? Because of limiting factors. We don't have enough capital to carry out all these projects. So you need to sit down and decide which one is going to be the best for you. Which one is going to be the most profitable? Which one is going to be which one is going to have the least cost? So when you reduce costs, you improve profitability. And of course, when you reduce cost, you increase productivity. And then when you also are profitable, you bring about growth of the business, you bring about expansion, you bring about wealth maximization for the owners of the business. Okay, so why do we need to think of relevant cost? Now, before we even delve further, what is this relevant cost? What is relevant cost? Some costs are relevant in decision making. Some costs are irrelevant when it comes to decision making. Relevant costs. I don't want you to memorize this, but I'll just summarize what it means. A relevant cost is a future cost, a future cash flow. A relevant cost is a future cash flow that differs from decision options. Okay? There are future cash flows that differ between these decision options. You have option A, B, C, and D. Now, any cost that is going to be a future cost and there is going to be a differential when you do the analysis of A, B, C, and D alternatives. This is just for illustration purpose. Then we say that cost is a future cost. Let's look at the futures of relevant costs. Number one, a future cost, a relevant cost is a future cost. Now, this is the first aspect of understanding relevant cost. It has to be a future cost. It has to be a future cash flow. Now, what do we mean by future cost? We are saying that this cost is in the future. It is not cost that is past. It is not cost that we call sunk. We say sunk cost. Past cost is sunk cost. In other words, the cost has already been incurred in the past, like the cost of buying a vehicle. You have bought this vehicle before, so it is not relevant for the future decision that you are going to make. It is no longer relevant. Look at the Ajaokuta steel factory. You know how much the federal government has sunk into it. It is no longer relevant for decision making. When you want to make a new decision about which project to take, which one will be which one will be more profitable, you don't need to think about the past. That cost has already been sunk. It has already been incurred. So it is no longer relevant for decision making. So the cost that is relevant in decision making has to be a future cost. Another one is that it has to be a cash flow. A relevant cost, a cost that is relevant for decision making, has to be of necessity a cash flow. It should not be a notional cost like depreciation, like interest, or like it should not be basically a cost that you cannot see moving. It should be a movement. A cash flow is a movement of cash. It is either coming in or going out. If it is coming in, we say it is a cash inflow. If it is going out, we say it is a cash outflow. So, with relevance to costs, a relevant cost has to be a cash outflow. It has to be a cash flow. It should not be a notional cost. It should not be something like depreciation, amortization, impairment, any of these things. It should not be any one of them. It should be a cash flow. Then it should also be a differential. It can be a differential. In other words, a relevant cost should differ. It should be different from this, from option A, B, C, D for illustration. They should not be the same. If the costs that you are looking at is the same for A, B, C, and D, then it's not relevant. It means anyone you take is okay. So for a cost to be relevant, it has to be differential. There must be difference between A, B, and C. Out of all the options that you're looking at, the relevant cost has to be different between the options, between the courses of action, between the alternatives. Oh, there are so many decisions we take, or so many decisions we make, that we have to consider relevant costs. For example, you want to make or buy. Should you make this product in-house, or should you buy it from outside? This is very important. Sometimes a contractor may offer you, make you an offer that he wants to supply this. Instead of you to make it, that you might think it's cheaper. When you look at the costs, you may think that it's actually cheaper for you to buy from outside, because maybe your cost has an element of costs that are not relevant in decision making. For example, maybe you have taken into cognizance your allocated fixed costs. The truth is, whether you buy from outside or you make in-house, you are still going to pay that rent. So that fixed cost is not a relevant cost in decision making. And so when you do this analysis in your make or buy, you may decide that it's actually cheaper for you. Say the relevant cost is a future cash flow that differs between the decision alternatives that you are considering. Now, what are the types? There are different types of relevant costs. One of them is a differential cost. As I said already, the differential costs. So when you look at your options, A, B, C, D, you look at all the options, the alternatives you have, the various projects that you have limited resources to invest in. When you look at all of them, if they differ, then it means it's a relevant cost. That is a type of relevant cost. Another one is opportunity costs. Opportunity costs. Opportunity costs. Now, opportunity costs simply refers to the benefit that will be lost, the benefit that will be sacrificed when you forgo the next best alternative. In other words, if you choose option A and the next best is option B that you did not choose, the benefit you would have gotten from B that you are sacrificing from taking option A. This is your next best, isn't it? Now you have decided to take option A, but the benefit you would have made from option B that you did not take, and which is your next best option, is the opportunity cost. Now that is very relevant in decision making. In traditional accounting, we don't look at that. We don't bring this cost in. But when it comes to financial management, when it comes to cost accounting, this opportunity cost is a very, very important aspect of decision making. This is very relevant to decision making. You have to take into cognizance what you are going to forgo. What are you sacrificing if you have decided to take this? Another one we want to look at, we have looked at differential, we have looked at opportunity costs, and then we also have to look at the incremental costs. Now, what do we mean by incremental? There are decisions you take that will bring about an increase in costs. For example, if you are looking at maybe to stop a production now or to process it further. It could be cassava production, for example. You have the harvest stage. The next one, you have the peeling. And then after the peeling, you also have maybe the grinding. Maybe you also have you are making gari, for example. You might decide to say, okay, let's stop at this point with the cassava and just sell it off. And you may decide to also process it further to make gari for sale. So if you are going to process further to make gari, are you going to incur an additional cost? That cost is incremental to you. So that cost is very, very relevant in decision making. To summarize, where do we need all of this? Sometimes we have make or buy decisions. Make. Do you make this product in-house? Do you make or buy? Do you make this product or do you ask a supplier to supply you? Sometimes a supplier can offer you to make that product for you. And the price is offering you, for example, let's say the supplier is offering you for 25 naira per unit. Now, you may discover that maybe your own production in-house is actually at 30 naira. So you look at it, 25 naira versus 25 versus 30. 30 is in-house. Supply from outside is 25. So it may look as if you buy from outside, it is cheaper. But by the time you do an analysis of the relevant costs that made up this 30,000, this 30 naira per unit, you may discover that it involves fixed costs that are not relevant for decision making. So what it means is that whether you buy from outside or whether you produce in-house, you are still going to pay that rent. And so rent as an allocated fixed cost is not relevant in decision making. So by the time you take that into cognizance, you may discover that this 30 naira is actually supposed to be 22 naira. In other words, you discover that it is cheaper for you to produce in-house than to buy from outside. Another decision that we may need the relevant costs, it could be, I've talked about make or buy. I've talked about produce now, stop production now, or process further. Another one is to remove a segment. You want to remove a segment of your operations. You have your production segment A, B, C, D. Maybe this one is production of rice, this one is production of beans, this one is corn, this one is sorghum. And you want to discontinue one. You have to look at the relevant costs. Sometimes you may think that a particular segment is making losses for you because it is actually full of irrelevant costs. And that is why you think it is making losses. Maybe you have some fixed costs that you have absorbed into it. And after this absorption, you observe that the cost looks very big. But basically, when you take into cognizance the relevant costs, you do a relevant cost analysis, you will discover that the costs that made this segment to be running at a loss are actually not relevant. So you may need to do what we call a marginal costing analysis. Or you may just need to look at the contribution. Is it having a positive contribution? If it is having a positive contribution, then you don't need to discontinue it. And what is that contribution? Contribution is simply your selling price less your variable cost per unit. So at this point, I think we have fully understood the concept of relevant cost and the importance it plays in decision making. A relevant cost, as I said, is a future cash flow that differs from decision options. That is what a relevant cost is. A relevant cost is a future cost. A relevant cost is a cash flow, not a notional cost, like depreciation, like allocated fixed costs, like interest. No, those ones are not relevant. Then a relevant cost is not a sunk cost. It's not a past cost. It is a future cost, okay? Also, a relevant cost has to be different. It has to be different from one option to the other. And lastly, I said a relevant cost has to be avoidable. It has to be an avoidable cost. Any cost that you know you can avoid. Maybe in these costs, under option A, if you take option B, if you take option B, maybe there's a cost that you must incur, like settling people in the community. Maybe there's a compulsory corporate social responsibility that you must perform if you are to take option B. But for option A, C, and D, you won't take it. So this is what we call an avoidable cost. If you have an avoidable cost, then it is a relevant cost. It means if you don't take this cost, this option, you won't incur the cost, so you can avoid it. Any cost that is avoidable is relevant in decision making. So whether you are management, whether you're a manager, whether you're a government official, whether you're an individual, whether you're a small business or a big business, you have to consider costs that are relevant when making decisions. All other costs that are not relevant, you have to throw them away. If not, they will becloud your judgment. If you enjoyed this lecture, I want you to share, to like, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is Accounting and Finance Coach. Accounting and Finance Coach. Thank you, and keep a date with me tomorrow. Thank you.